Sister Christina believed the words of the church leadership that Christian couples were only allowed divorce on the grounds of marital infidelity. According to them, no matter how many physical and verbal abuses that the Christian wife went through, she had to continue her relationship with her abusive Christian husband. Even, in case of desertion, she had still no ground of breaking the Christian marriage vow. Brother Bruno followed the advice of the church, subsequently rented an apartment and moved out of his parents' house and began to live with his wife. Nonetheless, the new arrangement was met with anger and protest by his parents and siblings. His parents accused the church leadership of forcing their son to forsake solid Indian customs and following the Western culture. Many parents in the church supported them and added their protest to the melee. Despite the protests and complaints of many families, the leaders of the church refused to rescind their decision and the couple continued to live in the rented apartment. When her in-laws failed to effect any change in the church's decision, they began to squabble and create problems for their daughter-in-law. They started to dig deeper into her clouded past and spread rumors about her. Brother Bruno's sisters and some of their church mates were able to find juicy tidbits on the internet on the life of the Iranian heroine and former Miss World, Aphrodite Khan. On the basis of their search, they portrayed Sister Christina as a chameleon who kept changing her form and color to suit the purpose at hand. According to their findings, she was once a Muslim going by the name Ifat Khan. Ifat had married a Saudi business tycoon. She married the 80-year-old Saudi man for his money. Then, she began to go by the moniker of the Iranian heroine, at which time she took on the identity of Aphrodite Khan. Aphrodite had a secret affair with a wealthy Bollywood film director and became his mistress. She also had an affair with a rising Bollywood film star named Samir Krishna and soon after changed her name to Amrita Krishna, professing to be a Hindu. Shortly thereafter, she married an NRI, Hindu named Rahul Patel and went by the name of Pooja Patel. She married Rahul Patel so that she could go to the United States of America. In order to reach America, she agreed to become a Hindu and marry a Hindu man. When she arrived, she left her Hindu husband and took up with a Muslim man by the name of Jamal Khan, reverting to her old name of Aphrodite Khan and re-embraced Islam. Just before she returned to India, she embraced the Christian faith and had her name legally changed to Christina Lewinsky. Finally, she married their brother, Bruno, and became Cristina Fernandez. While they could not find any overt reasons for her conversion to Christianity, Brother Bruno's sisters and their cohorts assumed that Aphrodite Khan had fallen in love with a wealthy American man, for whom she changed her religion and went by the name Christina Lewinsky. Their report also uncovered a previous internet article, which detailed her incarceration in a Mumbai jail, and the disgraceful title that was given to her at that time, Bollywood to waif. She had been arrested for being the highest-paid Bollywood prostitute and had sexual relations with many film stars and directors, politicians, top officials in the Mumbai Police Department, and wealthy people. Although, their report included many more false details which had never happened, it said nothing about her success in life of winning Miss Mumbai, Miss India, and Miss World. Furthermore, it said nothing about her controversial remarks about the Prophet Muhammad and the assassination plot of Dawood Ibrahim's Muslim terrorists, which forced her to flee out of India and ended up in the States. From that point, adding insult to injury, the vengeful girls started to call her the chameleon woman to her face. With the needed ammunition, Brother Bruno's sisters went on the offensive and began harassing their sister-in-law. They started to phone her at home and confront her with her past. They accused her of deception and hiding her nasty past and many marriages. According to them, it was the ultimate degradation in their Mangalorean Christian culture to wed a pure and chaste boy like their brother to a woman who had not only gone through many husbands, but also slept around like a tramp. They reinforced their stand by acknowledging that their brother deserved a virgin instead of a girl that had been around the block a few times. They punctuated their phone calls with unannounced and unnecessary visits, hoping to plague her into compliance. They simply wanted to cut through the chase and have her forget her search for her Muslim mother and take her husband to America. Sister Christina's in-laws turned her life into hell with no place for refuge. The very people she thought lived with the guidance of the Holy Spirit in Christ were now hounding her to do their bidding. Her husband sided with his parents, of course, and joined in the diatribe about their pending immigration status. He wanted her to begin the process of applying for him before the 6 months' grace was over. He knew, just like everyone else, that his application process would take in excess of another 6 months. Without informing her, he applied for a passport and with that in hand, continued to harangue her to apply for one too. The new passport was to bear the name Cristina Fernandez. Her mission clear, she refused all suggestions, resulting in her husband taking their dispute once again to the senior pastor and his wife. He accused his wife of reneging on her word and trying to run off to America without him. The pastor saw his point and called Sister Christina in for a talk. He firmly told her to apply for a new passport with her new married name. Being left with no choice, she applied for a new Indian passport and changed her name from Christina Lewinsky to Cristina Fernandez. What gave her so much sorrow wasn't having double nationalities now, American and Indian, but discarding her precious last name of her American lover, Lewinsky, and replacing it with the detestable last name of her Indian husband, Fernandez. She felt as if she had cheated on Michael and for no good reason she had abandoned his last name. As soon as Mrs. Fernandez's new passport was issued, her husband began to harass her to approach the American consulate in Mumbai and apply for joint visas for her spouse, father-in-law, and mother-in-law to join her in the United States of America. Once again, Sister Christina was forced through some leaders of the church to apply for her spouse and his parents. Before her husband and her in-laws got their immigration visas to the USA, something else developed to complicate the matter for her. A year had passed since Christina arrived in Mumbai and joined that Indian church. Finally, her search efforts bore fruit. A Christian woman, who had lived as a Muslim before adopting Christianity, had heard about her search and had come forward with information about Rehana Khan. According to the source, she knew of a Muslim woman named Rehana Khan who had 3 sons. She had returned from America and when she arrived, she told all her Muslim neighbors that her husband had divorced her, hence her return to the motherland. The ex-Muslim woman also added that she knew of an NRI, American Muslim man who visited India briefly and knew of the scandal, which led Rehana Khan forsaking her new home and eventually returning to India. According to the former family friend of the Khans, Mr. Khan had apparently fallen in love with a young girl, was young enough to be his daughter, and had eventually ignored and deserted Mrs. Khan. In addition to the huge age difference between the two, the girl was a Hindu and hence she refused to marry Mr. Khan until he converted to Hinduism. The resulting scandal and the ignominy of it all prompted Rehana Khan return home. After she had settled in, Rehana was wooed by a prominent Muslim mullah, religious leader, and married him. Mrs. Khan became his 3rd wife, but only due to her age and her situation, did Rehana agree to marry him. His position and social standing would have given her much needed acceptance and security, never mind that he was old enough to be her father. Then, the woman gave Christina the address of her former chawl when she used to live in Mumbai near the house of the former American NRI, Rehana Khan. She told her to go to that address and ask the people living in the chawl for the whereabouts of Begum Rehana Sheikh al-Din Khan. The ex-Muslim woman's former chawl was located in Mumbai. Christina, having spent most of her life outside India, was not familiar with the cultures of the diverse ethnicities in Mumbai. In India, people identified you with the clothes that you wore. A Muslim man would recognize a Muslim girl if she was standing among thousands of Hindu girls. Likewise, a Christian girl could be identified mostly through her Western clothes. On her visit to Mumbai, Christina dressed up as she was accustomed to in America. She wore tight jeans and a t-shirt, with a large crucifix around her neck. Her crucifix was tooled of pure gold. Her rear was accentuated by the tight denim material and her breasts were partially exposed. Not very eye-catching in the West but positively scandalous in certain areas of India. Her attire would be what the Indians refer to as a hugging dress. She looked extremely sexy in her dress. In the area where she was living at Mumbai and the church where she was attending, her Western dress would have been the norm and many of her church mates dressed identically. But, in a Muslim male-dominated society where she was going to meet her biological mother, her dress would attract much attention and put her in serious trouble with the men. Many Muslims adhere to the idea that a scantily dressed woman invites the crime of rape and the onus remains on the girl for any untoward incidents. Christina spent half of her day traveling from Bandra to Mumbai. She traveled by taxi, auto rickshaw, local train, bus, and finally cycle rickshaw. She was utterly exhausted by the end of her trip, having endured gropes, pinches, caresses, fondling, and all other over forms of sexual harassment, from the sexually frustrated males of Mumbai. In the overcrowded local trains, a young and very beautiful girl like her could expect to be raped in broad daylight. Her biggest mistake was to jump into the men's compartment, not realizing that local Mumbai trains allocated special compartments for ladies. The local buses were worse. Not only were they packed to the brim, but she was so hemmed in that the men took it upon themselves to indulge themselves. The way she was dressed made her even more vulnerable, tagging her as loose and available. Young Indian women simply did not dress like that when traveling, more so when they are without a chaperone. Even young women who witnessed her extreme discomfort reasoned that she was asking for it, and decided not to stand up for her. Some of them mistook her for a prostitute. One daring young man held Christina from behind, hugged her tightly, and began to rub his erected male organ on her buttocks, dry humping her until she screamed for rescue. Some old women shouted at him, so he let go of her body before he ejaculated. Another adventurous boy kissed her full in the lips and did not let go of her mouth until she bit him. Christina came out of that bus not only sexually assaulted and almost raped, but robbed of her golden cross too. What had made her vulnerable in that Muslim town was not just her lack of familiarity with the cultural norms or her mode of dress, but also the prominence of her cross. Indian Muslims believed that the Indian Christian girls were so westernized and thus freer than other vernacular Indian girls. What made it worse for Christina, her obvious lack of a male companion. Two of her volunteer helpers had forsaken her as soon as their hidden agendas did not work. The only volunteer who was able, by hook or crook, to fulfill his hidden agenda was Brother Bruno. As soon as he succeeded in marrying her, he also stopped helping her in her citywide search for her Muslim mother. When Christina came to know the location of where her mother was living in Mumbai, she begged her husband and asked him to accompany her, but he flatly refused. Brother Bruno wasn't happy when he learned that after 1 year of a citywide search, his wife had finally found the place where her mother was staying. He instinctively knew that finding his mother-in-law would no doubt delay his trip to the promised land. Christina traveled all the way from the civilized area of Bandra to the uncivilized town of Mumbai. It was just like someone had traveled from the pinnacle city of the Western civilization, New York, to the land of the greatest Islamic heritage, the dens of thieves and robbers, Al-Qaeda Mujahideen and the ISIS holy warriors, the city of Baghdad in Iraq or Mogadishu in Somalia. Muslims in India live in colonies created by them in every major city. Most of those colonies have Islamic names and only Muslims can enter and live in them. Just like Muslims in Europe, who have created no-go areas in many major European cities that are off-limits for non-Muslims. There are thousands of no-go zones created by Muslims in every city in India. Sometimes, you would find the entire city is cordoned by Muslims, such as Mumbai, and woe to any non-Muslim trespasser. Without knowing that she was entering a no-go town, Christina as a stray deer that crept into a dark den of wild beasts, she ventured into Mumbai. It took her 6 hours to reach her final destination. She left her apartment at 8 a.m. and arrived in Mumbai at 2 p.m. Her real troubles began when she reached Mumbai. Dozens of young Muslim boys followed her like dogs following a bitch in heat. Children joined the crowd and clustered around her as if she was an alien creature descended from another planet. Many Muslim women who were customarily wrapped from head to toe with their ubiquitous burqas made their discontent loudly known. As far as they were concerned, this young girl who suddenly appeared in their holy town was practically fully naked. Young girls stared at her as if she was a film star who mysteriously walked off the big screen of a movie theater and had miraculously manifested herself in their area. Christina heard the women and girls talking to each other in Urdu and describing her in very derogatory words. Those Muslim women did not know that Christina was once a Muslim like them and knew their Urdu language. She heard them describing her as, "She is a Christian girl, she is a shameless girl, she is a street girl, she is like a she-dog who can do it with men in the street, she is a prostitute." Voicing their insults from behind their burqas, those Muslim women appeared to Christina as black ghosts. As a matter of fact, she wasn't far from the truth. Behind those burqas there are only bones and emaciated bodies of female-like creatures. Those black burqas are not attires of modesty and blessings but great burden and curses on those poor creatures. Listing all the implications of purdah, or burqa, the father of Indian constitution, Dr. Ambedkar describes Muslim women as they are usually victims to anemia, tuberculosis, and pyorrhea. Their bodies are deformed, with their backs bent, bones protruded, hands and feet crooked. Ribs, joints, and nearly all their bones ache. Heart palpitation is very often present in them. The result of this pelvic deformity is untimely death at delivery. The process of moral degeneration must and does set in. Being completely secluded from the outer world, they engage their minds in petty family quarrels. The physical and intellectual effects of purdah are nothing as compared to its effects on morals. A social system which cuts off all contacts between the two sexes produces an unhealthy tendency towards sexual excesses and unnatural and other morbid habits and ways. It is responsible for the social segregation of Hindus from Muslims, which is the bane of public life in India. Not that purdah and the evil consequent thereon are not to be found among certain sections of the Hindus. But the point of distinction is that among the Muslims, purdah has a religious sanctity which it has not with the Hindus. Pakistan or the Partition of India, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Volume 8, Education Department, Government of Maharashtra, Mumbai, 1990, pages 230 to 232. The young Muslim boys went further than the women and began to say to each other, "I just want to stick it in her big buttocks, I want to put it in her mouth, I will begin with her breasts and then end up in her vagina." Christina knew that if it wasn't for their women the boys might have raped her in broad daylight. The vulgar remarks hit home and Christina began to feel very underdressed. She regretted putting on Western clothes. If she had any inkling as to the villagers' reaction, she would have put on a Pakistani salwar kameez and wrapped herself up in an Indian sari. In some Muslim countries such as Egypt, a girl without an Islamic hijab or niqab will be splashed with burning acid. In Sudan, a girl without an Islamic dress or if she is wearing a trouser she will be arrested and given 53 lashes in public gathering. Even a Sudanese Christian girl and a foreign female are not exempted from this law. Christina was tempted to confront those boys and rebuke them in Urdu but held her tongue knowing that as a mob, they would be aggressive, and who knows what could happen. She feigned ignorance and continued to walk along the narrow lanes with much trepidation. While she was walking, she saw human refuse scattered everywhere, amidst strewn household garbage and discarded items no longer worth salvaging. Human excrement was all around, some fresh and some crusty and dry. The entire town of Mumbai like a large public washroom. Christina literally had to hop over piles of excrement to move forward. The open gutters, which were commonplace, emitted a nauseous smell that did not seem to bother the local residents. As if they were all of them immunized against that noxious and disease-airborne foul odor. She navigated the dark alley punctured with slivers of sunlight, bending over to avoid hitting the low roofs of the shawls. The distance between one row of shawls and the other would hardly allow two people to walk abreast. Between every row of shawls was usual gutter filled with sewage from the shawls themselves. Sewer systems and cisterns were non-existent. Every chawl with an open door opened up to children and their parents stuffed into an incredibly small area. Christina wondered to herself how the children could remain alive and not fall seriously ill and die in those filthy and unhealthy pockets of human habitation. She remembered her huge $5 million mansion in America and how her late husband, daughter, and she used to live comfortably. After walking for some time, Christina retrieved an address from her handbag given to her by the ex-Muslim woman who recently joined her church. She showed the slip of paper to one of the boys who kept dogging her heels. He screened the writing and replied in Hindi, "No Angres, no English." She was surprised to hear him speak in Hindi. She did not expect that some of the Muslims could be bilingual. She started to speak to him in Hindi, reading out the address on the slip. The boy took her left hand and began to pull her along as if she was his girlfriend or an acquaintance. Obviously, he was posturing, as his other friends started to protest in Urdu when she accepted his hand. She ignored the chatter and continued to walk with her new guide. Her guide beamed a smile so with that you would have thought he was walking hand in hand with the film star Katrina Kaif. Christina followed the boy from lane to lane and jumped over even more gutters and clumps of human waste until finally reached the chawl in question. All time, the boy kept holding her hand and the other boys became their entourage. Christina was surprised when an old woman who was living in the front chawl told her that the chawl had not been inhabited by anyone for very long time. Then, she informed her that the Muslim woman who used to live in that deserted chawl left her husband and children and ran away with a Christian infidel man. Her husband could not live in the chawl due to the scandal of his bad wife. He just took his children and disappeared. No one knew where he was living now. Every now and then, he would send someone out to try to sell his chawl, but for many months, he had not been able to find anyone to buy it. The old woman told Christina she believed that Allah had placed a curse on the chawl for the great unpardonable sin of the Muslim wife. According to our blessed Sharia, that unfaithful wife was supposed to be buried in the ground up to her neck and then stoned to death by men. She had not only forsaken her religion, but her husband and children to be with an uncircumcised infidel dog. She was now a Christian woman, murtada, an apostate, and kafira, infidel woman, like her filthy infidel lover. Christina understood that the old woman was talking about the ex-Muslim woman who gave her the address and directed her to the place where her Muslim mother was supposed to be found. She was worried that the old woman might ask her about the person who directed her to come to that desolate of habitat. She knew about the conversion of the ex-Muslim woman, but she did not know that there was a secret affair involved, which led that woman to forsake her family and chawl and elope with a Christian man. Looking uneasily at the lodging, the old woman claimed that the chawl was haunted by evil jennies, ghosts and monsters. She said that many times she heard at night, the voice of a woman screaming in anguish. With her loud screaming, she could hear the sounds of someone beating her with heavy rod. Sometimes, she heard the voice of the same woman was shouting out, "I am burning in Gehenna," Hebrew Gehinnom, biblical Gehenna or hell. The old woman went on to say, "Whenever I heard voices, I would peep through the door of the haunted chawl, but I have never seen anyone inside. May the exalted Allah forgive me." The old woman seemed to have made mistake in her accounts and hence sought the forgiveness of her God. "On one dark and hot night," resumed the old woman, "I heard a very loud crying of a woman who is in severe agony and torment. Before I went to the haunted chawl, I did ablution and offer short prayer to my Allah. After kneeling and prostrating twice before him, I beseeched him to show me what is going on in the life of that accursed woman. When I went and peeped through a small hole in the door, I saw the apostate woman. She is bare naked like on the day her mother gave birth to her, and she is hanging through her breasts with chained anchors. A huge flame of fire is burning beneath her. She is Christina suddenly interrupted that never-ending ghost story from one of those old ladies' fables and told the old woman that she was searching for a woman by the name of Begum Rayhana Sheikh Uldin Khan. She was shocked when she heard the boy who had brought her there, and other boys who were still following her, replying in unison in Urdu, "We know her." She was so surprised that all those boys knew her mother. The boy who was still holding her hand said to her, "I can take you to the house of Begum Rayhanaji."